There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just stares at the phone, replays the last conversation, reads between cold, unfinished messages, feels the temperature change without understanding why. One day they were close, soft, present, maybe not fully open, but there, and the next it was like somebody pulled their soul behind a locked door and left you outside with your own heartbeat for company. If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know this feeling. It's not just rejection. It's confusion. It's emotional whiplash. It's being given just enough warmth to believe in the connection, and then being punished for believing in it too deeply. And if you're the super empath in that dynamic, the one who feels everything, notices everything, forgives everything, and keeps trying to love through the silence, then this cuts even deeper. Because your instinct is not to run when someone pulls away. Your instinct is to understand. You tell yourself they're scared. You tell yourself they've been hurt. You tell yourself if you can just love them the right way, softly enough, wisely enough, patiently enough, they'll finally feel safe enough to stay. But here's the brutal truth. The more you chase an avoidant with your understanding, the easier it becomes for them to leave you emotionally and still keep you psychologically close. That's the part no one tells you. Your empathy, when it has no boundaries, becomes the emotional cushion that protects them from the consequences of losing you. Every extra paragraph you send, every moment you over-explain, every time you say, "I know you're overwhelmed. I'm here when you're ready." You may think you're proving love, but sometimes what you're really doing is helping them avoid the full weight of your absence. You become the bridge, the backup supply, the soft landing, the emotional oxygen they can breathe without having to face intimacy in a real, grounded, accountable way. And that's why they can drift, disappear, come back, pull away again. Not because they don't feel, but because they can. That's what makes this dynamic so addictive. Because on the surface, it looks like they're detached and you're devoted. But underneath, something much more complicated is happening. Your nervous systems are locked in a dance. Their body reads closeness as pressure. Yours reads distance as danger. So when they feel too much, they pull back to regulate. And when you feel them pull back, you move closer to restore connection. Both of you are trying to survive. It just looks like love. This is why the dynamic feels so spiritual, so intense, so impossible to let go of. It's not random. It's chemistry mixed with childhood patterning, attachment memory, and a nervous system that mistakes familiarity for fate. For many avoidantly attached people, emotional closeness does not only create comfort, it also creates alarm. The amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for threat, can start reading intimacy as loss of control, loss of self, loss of freedom. Not because love is dangerous, but because somewhere in their wiring, closeness got linked to overwhelm. So when things get deep, when your love starts asking for consistency, honesty, emotional presence, their system can flood. Cortisol rises, the body tightens, the mind starts looking for distance, flaws, reasons, escape routes. They may not even fully understand why they suddenly feel irritated, numb, tired, or not sure anymore. They just know they need space. And if you are the super empath, you feel that shift before they ever say it. You catch it in the delayed reply, the flatter tone, the subtle withdrawal of warmth. You become hyper-attuned. Your dopamine, the reward chemical that lights up around hope and uncertainty, starts feeding on crumbs. A text back feels like relief. A moment of closeness feels like rescue. And suddenly, you are not just loving them, you are waiting for them, watching them, trying to regulate your pain through their attention. That's why this can feel like obsession even when your intentions are pure. Because inconsistency creates fixation. The brain clings harder to what it cannot predict. But here is the reframe that changes everything. They didn't always stop caring. A lot of the time, they felt overwhelmed by caring. That matters. Because if you misread their withdrawal as proof that you meant nothing, you'll destroy yourself trying to become more lovable. You'll make their distance about your inadequacy. You'll think, maybe I was too emotional, too available, too intense, too much. But being too real is not why they ran. What overwhelmed them was not your worth. It was the intimacy your presence awakened. You became a mirror, and avoidants can be strangely magnetized by people who make them feel deeply, without demanding performance. That's why they are often drawn to the super empath in the first place. You don't just listen to their words, you hear the ache underneath them. You don't just react to their behavior, you sense the wound behind it. Around you, they feel seen in a way they almost never feel. And that is intoxicating. But it is also terrifying, because being deeply seen by the right person is one of the most destabilizing experiences for someone who survives by compartmentalizing. You touch places in them they've spent years learning not to feel. Your softness gets past their defenses. Your patience lowers their guard. Your emotional depth starts reaching the part of them that wants connection so badly, it almost hurts. And then, panic enters, because now it matters. Now you matter. Now losing control is possible. So they distance. Not because the bond was fake, but because it was real enough to scare them. This is where most super empaths break themselves. They think the answer is to prove safety more clearly, to love better, to explain more gently, to become less threatening, less expressive, less needy, less human. They abandon their truth in the name of not overwhelming someone who is already overwhelmed by intimacy itself. And that never works for long, because you cannot heal someone's fear of closeness by making yourself smaller. You only teach them that love will contort itself to stay. And once that happens, the pattern gets uglier. You begin translating their silence, defending their inconsistency, romanticizing their confusion, calling emotional unavailability depth, calling mixed signals trauma, calling your own exhaustion patience. No, at some point, empathy becomes self-abandonment wearing a halo. And this is the part where the power dynamic starts to shift. Not when you become colder, not when you play games, not when you try to punish them with absence, but when you finally understand one core truth. Silence is the language that reveals reality. Not performative silence, not manipulative silence, not the kind used to provoke jealousy or force a reaction. I mean the kind of silence that happens when you stop interrupting the truth, when you stop chasing, stop filling in the blanks, stop offering emotional labor to someone who has not earned access to it. Stop rescuing them from the experience of missing you. That silence is unbearable at first, especially for a super empath, because your identity has been wrapped around responding, soothing, sensing, anticipating. You are used to being the emotional oxygen in the room. You are used to feeling powerful through your ability to hold other people together. So when you go quiet, really quiet, not from anger, but from self-respect, it feels like withdrawal. Your body panics. You want to reach out, clarify, check in, ease the tension. You tell yourself closure is needed. But often, what you call closure is just an attempt to reduce the anxiety of no longer being chosen. Sit with that. Because the moment you stop managing their discomfort, something important happens. The emotional structure they relied on starts collapsing. The space they once used to regulate without consequence begins to feel different, heavier, emptier, more final. And now they can feel what your empathy used to protect them from. Your absence. Not your words, not your explanations, not your pain narrated in paragraphs. Your absence. That is what avoidants struggle with more than people realize. Not the argument, not the emotional conversation. The emptiness that comes when the person who made connection feels safe, soft, and forgiving is no longer energetically available. Because despite what they show, many avoidants do not stop attaching. They suppress, they minimize, they distract, they intellectualize, they move the feeling out of conscious reach. But attachment does not disappear because it is buried. It waits, and silence has a way of digging it up. That's when the memories get louder. The nervous system, no longer occupied by the pressure of closeness, starts replaying what was lost. The scent of you in a room, the way you looked at them without judgment, the ridiculous small things you remembered, the emotional shelter you created without even trying. Suddenly, the very presence they once fled becomes the absence they cannot organize around. And yes, this can turn into pursuit. Not always mature pursuit, not always honest pursuit. Sometimes it arrives as a random check-in, a like on an old story, a late-night message, a weird excuse, just seeing how you are. A sudden nostalgia they pretend means nothing. But make no mistake, something is happening. The person who once felt suffocated by your love may now feel haunted by the loss of your emotional availability. Because when you were constantly there, they could take your presence for granted. But when you stop reaching, stop waiting, stop radiating devotion into a void, they have to face a reality they were never emotionally prepared for. You were not replaceable. That is what many super empaths fail to understand about themselves. You think your power is in how deeply you love. It's not. Your power is in what your love awakens. Your steadiness, your emotional intuition, your capacity to see through armor without humiliating the person wearing it. That kind of presence leaves an imprint. An avoidant may date other people, talk to other people, distract themselves, convince themselves they're fine. But what they often cannot easily recreate is the nervous system experience of being deeply understood without force. That's rare. That's why they circle back. That's why they remember you in quiet moments. That's why your energy lingers long after the conversation ends. Not because you were perfect, but because you reached somewhere real. Still, this is where I need to warn you. Do not misunderstand their return as proof that the pattern is broken. This is where so many people lose themselves all over again. Because when the avoidant comes back, it can feel like validation. Like finally they see your worth. Finally, they miss you enough. Finally, the silence worked. Finally, love wins. But attention is not transformation. Missing you is not the same as being ready for you. Craving your warmth is not the same as being able to protect it. And if you open the door too quickly, without evidence of emotional growth, accountability, and consistency, the old circuit reactivates. The chemistry returns. The hope surges. Dopamine floods. Your body mistakes renewed contact for resolution. But unresolved patterns do not become safe just because they become sentimental. If they come back only because your absence hurt, but not because they have learned how to stay present when intimacy rises, then you are not entering a new relationship. You are re-entering the old wound. And this time it can cut deeper, because now your hope is involved again. So if they return, watch carefully. Not what they say when they feel you slipping, what they do when closeness returns. Do they communicate when overwhelmed or vanish? Do they take responsibility or offer vague longing? Do they make space for your feelings or only seek access to your softness? Do they want connection or comfort? Do they want intimacy or relief? There is a difference, a huge one. The super empath grows when they stop confusing being needed with being valued. Because yes, avoidants can miss you desperately. They can think about you constantly. They can feel your absence like a phantom ache under the ribs. They can even come back with tears in their voice and sincerity in their chest, and still not know how to love you well. That is not cruelty, but it is danger, especially if your old pattern is to translate intensity as commitment. The real shift happens when you no longer need their return to validate your impact. You know what you were. You know what they felt. You know the bond was real without needing to be consumed by it. That is freedom. And something almost mystical happens when a super empath reaches that stage. The energy changes. The desperation leaves your eyes. The over-explaining dries up. Your nervous system stops bending itself around someone else's unpredictability. You stop monitoring. Stop fantasizing. Stop auditioning for a place in someone's emotionally guarded life. You come home to yourself. And when you do, the entire dynamic breaks. Because the version of you that could be kept in emotional limbo no longer exists. Now, if they come near you, they meet someone different, someone softer with themselves, cleaner in their boundaries, warmer but not available for confusion, open but not starving, deep but not self-sacrificing. Someone who understands that real love does not require chronic deciphering. Someone who no longer mistakes emotional hunger for destiny. Someone who can feel compassion without volunteering for pain. That is the identity shift. Not, I'll make them regret losing me. Not, I'll become so detached they chase. Not, I'll prove my value by being impossible to forget. No, it is quieter than that, stronger than that. It is this. I am no longer available for bonds that feed on my empathy, but cannot hold my heart. Read that again in your own soul. I am no longer available for bonds that feed on my empathy, but cannot hold my heart. Because your self-worth was never supposed to be built on who comes back. It was supposed to be built on what you no longer beg to keep. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. Avoidants often can't stay away from the super empath because the super empath touches something unforgettable in them. Something unarmored. Something tender. Something human. But the moment that becomes your reason for waiting, you lose the very power that made you unforgettable in the first place. Your magic was never in the chase. It was in your presence, your depth, your truth, your capacity to love without becoming hollow. So let them feel the silence. Let them feel the contrast. Let them wonder where the warmth went. Not because you're playing a role, but because you finally understand that your energy is sacred, and not everyone who is drawn to it is ready to care for it. That realization will break your heart open, and then it will rebuild you. Stronger, cleaner, unreachable by the old pattern. And if they do come back, you won't be the same person they left behind. You won't be standing at the door with an apology for having needs. You won't be trembling with gratitude over crumbs. You won't be trying to prove that your love is gentle enough to survive neglect. You will simply see clearly. You will know that being deeply felt is not the same as being deeply chosen. And from that place, you become dangerous to every cycle that once fed on your self-abandonment. Because now you are not driven by fear of loss. You are anchored in truth. And truth has a frequency avoidant patterns can feel immediately. Some will rise to meet it. Some will run from it. Some will miss you forever and still not know how to hold you. That is their journey. Yours is different now. Yours is to become the one person you stop abandoning in the name of love. The one person you finally stay with. The one person you stop negotiating away. The one person whose silence no longer means emptiness, but peace. And when that happens, you don't just become hard to leave. You become impossible to misuse.